thanks to Ken and I didn't see Jamie today, but she's here. Okay, yeah. And so yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the Alberta Pulse Plot to Field program. And when I talked to Jamie earlier this spring, and she said, "Do you want any? Can you use any plots? And so I said, "Well, this year, as part of that particular project, which I'll describe in a minute here." And by the way, this shovel is just a prop for me, to keep me from falling over here today. But it's a seeding rate. It's a seeding rate comparison for peas that we're doing in the province this year. And so I'll just kind of give a little bit of a background on the Alberta Pulse Growers Plot to Field program. And so this is an idea that was conceived a few years ago, where Jen Walker, if you've met her with Alberta Pulse, decided, working with the research committee with Alberta Pulse to try and do some field scale research to try and take, and I think the concept being, okay, we know and we have the work going on in kind of in a small plot scenario, but can we then take some of that to the field and test those, but do so using good research methodology, right, in terms of statistical design. And I've done that quite a bit in my career, and so they were, and I know Farming Smarter is, that's a lot of the kind of work that they do is, with the Precision Ag project and other projects is testing things, where you give a lot of thought to how do we design, something on a field scale basis so that we can kind of take that to the bank in terms of some reliable results. Maybe not always publishable results, but some data generated at a field scale that can be subjected to some statistical analysis. And so they about a year and a half ago, Alberta Pulse pulled together a number of research scientists from across Alberta, some of the specialists within government, and some agronomists, and with their research committee kind of struck this plan, which is I think it's a 5-year plan. It's about a $2 million project to do some field scale research. And so this they actually have contracted 3 agronomists in this first year of the project, myself, and then Ken King at Three Hills, and J.P. Pettijohn, who is actually currently he's an instructor at Lakeland College, and so they asked each of us in this initial year to find 3 farmers in each of our subjective areas, prospective areas, I should say, and basically they decided in this first year this would be kind of a proof of concept, and so they identified a plant population basically comparison, so for pea, and so we've got the 9 cooperators across the province. Actually, because of extremely late harvest into mid to late May of this year, one of the farmers actually had to back out. So I think they have 8 sites across the province this year. And in southern Alberta, we have a site at Lomond, we have a site at Mossley, and we have another site at Claresholm. And at each of those sites, we have a field scale trial where we've got a replicated and randomized of 3 plots, basically a low, meaning sort of around 4.5 plants per square foot, more of a kind of a typical kind of target plant population, which would be in the 7.5 plants per square foot, and then 10.5 plants per square foot. And so basically that's the project in a nutshell. What we've been spending a lot of time on this last through the fall fall, winter, spring period is sort of developing protocols and sort of, I guess, a methodology where we can go forward into some more complicated trials in sort of that second, third, and fourth year of this project. So if we're going to start doing some comparisons with, things like fungicides or some other features, or start working on crops like lentils and maybe faba beans further north in the province, and they wanted to basically sort of have a methodology to test I guess partly to test the willingness of the farmers, because there's it's a big hassle. I mean, for most of these guys, it's occupying like a full day during planting operations, and there's obviously a lot of kind of preparation leading up to that day. But we probably take anywhere from two-thirds to almost a full day, and then at harvest it's going to be another full day that they're going to have to take. And so we're kind of keeping track of the time that it takes for the agronomist, the time that it takes for each of those farms, and then they want to compensate the farmers for their involvement in the program, basically. And so that's, and of course I'm getting paid as well, to do this work. So yeah, we're basically doing in the protocols we've identified sort of the key measures that we want, and in terms of evaluating that. So yeah, I guess, Ken, that sort of, in a nutshell, sort of describes the basics for that APG plot to field program going forward. And I mean, maybe we just take a few minutes just for kind of questions and I guess thoughts, and then if we want to take a bit of time, we can talk about pea seeding rates, or any questions that you have on peas, and we can kind of have a discussion there as well. But yeah, any questions? The good news is we'll have a little more time to talk about forages here. So hey, Brian.
Do you have
yes.
Do you have a bunch of research priorities that they're looking at doing with the farmers in the coming years? Like, is there specific fungicides, specific other agronomic things that for sure you want to look at, or is it pretty open to like producers to give input, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's good question, Mike. And I think the idea is that there'll be the research committee of Alberta Pulse is kind of a little bit of the sort of the sounding board, if you will, for ideas. And this 9 and this, I think this growing list of cooperators that will be involved. But I think absolutely for ideas. I mean, the fungicides are one that obviously come up. Some issues around inoculation, but I think you're looking. Alberta Pulse is spending a fair chunk of change on this, and so they want to create some awareness for it. They're talking about maybe having a bit of a opportunity for feedback, at Farm Tech, for example, is one of the sessions there, and talking about the plot to field program and trying to gather some input, next January. So yeah, we I think when they conceived of the idea of pea plant populations as a bit of a kind of a sort of a bit of a proof of concept year, you kind of think, well, that's not all that exciting. We've kind of got that somewhat figured out, And so, but I think the part of it is just, we want to. They kind of wanted to go a little bit more slowly before you start getting into, where you're bringing sort of the field scale sprayers out to do some fungicide trials, and so trying to put a lot more effort into things like calibration and attention to using weigh wagons as opposed to relying, strictly on yield monitors, but being sure that we have those yield monitors calibrated for the plot so that we can, again, have that data as well. But I think we all know some of the challenges with our yield monitors in terms of that. It's a great tool, but it's giving us an indication. But in terms of the absolute numbers, we'll be weighing those strips.
How many grow or dedicate to this activity?
Yeah, that's a good question too, Bob. And so, like for the 3 sites that I've got, and so one of the things in the protocol is just the site identification. And so looking at doing a little bit of testing, ahead of time and looking at some previous yield maps and looking at some imagery. The one site at Lomond is, it's a section field. And so our plots are basically would be 70 foot wide by a third of a mile. So I think the entire plot area, if I recall, that entire plot area is around 25 to 30 acres. And the other sites, typically around 15 to 20 acre size. And yeah, but they could even be smaller. Like I think, when we were looking at this, we said, depending on the type of project, you're kind of matching the size of your plot to your equipment widths and the field variability. But what we didn't want to do was just to try to do small plot research with large scale equipment. that was one of the temptations that I think, well, particularly,
Isn't that what you're doing though?
well, in a sense. And what I mean, Ken, is that there was one plot plan that we looked at, and they said, we can have, a plot that's maybe 300 feet long, and I said, well, on that particular farm, I said, a 300 foot long plot, that's pretty much, just the length of our planter, with the carts. And so you have to have sort of sufficient length, number one, to be able to sort of get, things planted. But yeah, you're right about that the design is not untypical of what we would have on a small plot, just, on a field scale. The thing that becomes really, really frustrating when you start to do research, small plot research or field scale research, is that there's a limited number of variables that you can test at any one time. And so that is one of the, for those of us that have tried to do sort of field scale research in the past, we've always wanted to test too many variables. You think, oh man, if we're going to get out there, let's add, this variable, and let's add that variable, and then pretty soon you don't really, have anything to work with, because you've sort of lost control of what you're trying to measure. And so you have to really be cautious with trying to test too many things in one particular plot. But it does, obviously occupy a very large field area when you may only have one or at most 2 variables that you're actually able to test. And if you're looking at one variable with 3 replicates, 3 or 4 replicates, and you're already up to you're up to, if you're comparing, say, 3 plant populations and 3 reps, we're up to 9 plots. And I mean, if you add, Bob could probably tell us, but if you add another variable in there, how many plots do you need, Bob?
Well, I guess you more than double,
Yep.
or triple everything.
Yeah, you double and triple, and it just becomes unworkable at a field scale. So we have to generally keep these things relatively simple. And so that'll be part of what I think they learn over this, 3 or 4 or 5 year period, is that maybe this, maybe the cost versus sort of the limitation in terms of the number of things that you can test sort of efficiently across, a region is has to be considered, right? So Manitoba has a kind of a similar program, and they're up to somewhere around, I think, 100 cooperators on their program now. And so we're sort of just getting started here, really. So we may be signing up more agronomists. It does take a fair bit of time to manage these sites. So
I
Any questions for Rob about pulses in general or field scale research? Ask him about his kids.
Maybe want to know the hard on the shovel.
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to worry about losing your shovel or anyone stealing your shovel, you know, with the heart. So, yeah, yeah.
He's so against tillage.
Yes.
Well, join me in thanking Rob.
Yep. You bet.